So I thought to share with you some information regarding the wearing of leashes and capsize and recovery in association with OC1 canoes. And this will come from, I'm taking it from this book, the OC1 book, Paddler's Guide. Given that we're in lockdown right now, I mean, one of the things that a lot of people paddling OC1s, because obviously a lot of canoe clubs are not functioning as they normally would be, so we're out there doing our own thing solo. But you know, this is a topic that's been around for years, since the inception of the OC1, and you know, wearing of a leash has become a topic of conversation. But to be fair, not many people wear them. It's something associated with downwind paddling, and that's you know, that they are used, but again, infrequently. And of course, it's only when someone experiences the loss of a canoe, or you meet someone that has experienced that you will actually give it perhaps a bit more gravitas. But I have heard stories of people being in the water for up to 12 hours, and even people have been in the water overnight through losing their canoe. I know in the Hawaii Kai run on Oahu, in the islands of Hawaii, you know, that's there's been many stories come out of that particular run where people have lost canoes, and some of them funny and some of them not so funny. But I think at the end of the day, you know, it does iterate the point that wearing of a leash does have gravitas, and it is a sensible option and a sensible thing to consider. And I think in certain areas, particularly the world, you know, has more gravitas than other areas, in respect of cold water paddling, for example. But in respect of losing your canoe in totality, literally waving it goodbye, and some canoes have actually been lost and never found again, to the best of their knowledge, it does bring home the point that, you know, wearing of a leash is a critical issue. So what I've done in this chapter is really look at some of the different types of leashes that are available to us, and some that are perhaps obvious and less obvious. One thing that I do make a comparison to also is the idea of wearing a PFD and wearing a leash, and the relevance between the two, and perhaps putting a bit more emphasis on the leash wearing as against the wearing of the PFD. Now, wearing PFDs is very much something that's often comes about because local harbour masters or local authorities dictate that you must. Beyond that, few of us wear one voluntarily. On the other hand, the wearing of a leash, you know, this is something that harbour masters and others and authorities are unaware of. So this is very much, there's no jurisdiction saying you know, thou shalt wear a leg leash. But in terms of your own risk management and your own appraisal of the situation, you know, the wearing of one does make complete sense in particular conditions. And you know, I think hopefully just covering some of this information here will prompt you to consider it. So I won't go to this first section I read was talking about, you know, there are differences in so much as, you know, levels of risk. So clearly, I mean, if you're paddling in cold water, if you were to lose your canoe, you know, instantly you are already in a far greater risk situation, because the chances of becoming hypothermic and leading to drowning is a far greater issue. And of course, the further you are away from landfall, then, you know, that becomes an issue. Can you get back to shore easily enough? Which does raise a whole lot of other issues too, in terms of perhaps some additional safety equipment that you could take with you. But that's something I can cover at a later date. Again, I'd say this is more about wearing leashes and PFDs and making comparisons. I mean, yes, you could be wearing both, but there are always, the wearing of PFD is always problematic in respect of recovery, and everyone knows that is the case. And also, it's also worth to be very clear that a personal flotation device is simply an aid to your buoyancy or flotation. If you were to become unconscious, you will float face downwards and you will drown. It's as simple as that. So in many respects, the only solution is a life jacket, which will support your neck and keep your head upwards and face upwards and allow you to breathe. So it's not as straightforward as you might think. So again, it all comes back to this concept of the canoe, in fact, being your PFD. That is your primary flotation device, and of course, the wearing of a PFD will ultimately become your secondary. But you must also understand, if you come off wearing a PFD and you're wearing a leash, great, you can then remount. It's going to be a bit more problematic because of the sheer mass that you're having to deal with in terms of trying to get back on. It's clumsy. Your ability to duck dive under the canoe is limited. That's a problem, and it's a genuine problem, because part of the recovery process often can be you've got to duck dive underneath your canoe. Now, wearing a flotation device makes that a problem, which means you can only go over the top of it. So, knowing these knock-on issues, these effects, is really important. So, for example, if you're wearing a leash, a conventional leash in the canoe, and you have a flip and you go over, hulu, as everyone likes to call it, then be aware of entanglement problems. There can be issues of the way that the leash then wraps around the canoe, or around the foot pedals, around the yaku, whatever. There are potentially issues. Now, the thing is, I think if you're going to wear a leash, then you need to go out in flat water and practice what it feels like to actually go to capsize wearing one, and then look at ways that you'd go about recovering the canoe, in terms of righting it, and recovering in respect of how you're going to remount and get back onto that canoe. Additionally, try experimenting with falling off the canoe and seeing just how great an effect the wind has. So, for example, I have an image here of myself falling quite deliberately, and then what I've done is just the canoe's just drifting away from me. The first thing I'm going to do is not hesitate. The canoes, I've come off, the canoes remained upright, and then I've decided that, okay, best thing to do, grab the paddle, chuck the paddle toward the canoe, and swim after it. Don't hesitate. If you start looking for your sunglasses, you start looking for your cap, you start looking for your water bottle, you start getting distracted because you think, oh, well, I'll get the most important thing first, my sunglasses, my hat, my cap, bye-bye canoe. So, you really have to be, aware of just how little wind it takes to push this canoe away from you, all right? Add in some waves and becomes equally problematic. You only have to have a boat go past, a bit of boat wake will pick it up and push it away from you. So there are multiple factors there to consider, but you really need to just experiment with this. Go out and have a bit of fun in your creek, your local lagoon, wherever, somewhere quiet, and then extrapolate from that. And you multiply that out and say, well, what's going to be like when it's rough and windy? Well, I can assure you it's going to get a whole lot worse in the absence of wearing a leash. Just to reiterate the point here, where I've fallen, and throwing the paddle forward is quite a handy tip. You chuck the paddle and swim after your canoe. Now, why do you do that? Well, if you've ever not left your paddle behind and then simply gotten on the canoe with no paddle, trying to get back to your paddle and navigate the waters, trying to pull a canoe or paddle it with your hands to go back to your paddle is a nightmare. So you kind of in a weird situation. If you lose your paddle altogether, you are obviously in an interesting situation. But of course, that iterates the point, put a spare paddle on the canoe, because that is a very real possibility. Because if you fall off, it may well be just worth ditching the paddle, forgetting about it, swimming back to the canoe, getting that back under control, getting a spare paddle, then paddling back to find the originally lost one, the original one, and starting back over. So it's a question of methodology and sequence. What sequence of things should I do first? What are the most important things through the least important, and then take it from there.